we've had some really great sessions today and a lot of really great chat alongside them, and a bunch of questions that have been coming up through that chat. And so I think it's kind of the perfect way to round this out with a panel discussion with some of the kind of most eminent members of our community. I'm sure are thinking a lot about all of this stuff. And so I think I'm going to take myself off stage. Remkus de Vries is here, a longtime friend of the WordPress community. I'm sure everybody who is here, or many who are here already know, is going to moderate this panel for us. And so I will hand over to him, and he will introduce our illustrious panelists, and then we will get going. So Remkus, over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everyone. We're doing the panel on AI and the future of WordPress, and we have some wonderful guests for this. I'm going to introduce Josh Koenig, co-founder, chief strategy officer at Pantheon, Shane Perlman, president at Modern Tribe, Ann McCarthy, product wrangler at Automatic, and last but certainly not least, Daniel Walmsley, who's a code wrangler at Automatic. So I have a few questions which I kind of want to use to sort of guide the conversation. And I'd like to ask the first question. I'd like to kick off with a very specific question, and specifically for Ann and Daniel, since they both work at Automatic, which is, last I'm told, the largest instance of WordPress is running with you guys. And my question that I'd like to start with is, what use cases of AI are you from within Automatic most excited about? Because my reasoning for this is I'm fairly certain you have an incredibly large user base. So that sort of points it in a direction, but I'm really curious if there's things that you are particularly excited about.
Dan, I'm going to make you answer this first.
Okay, well, I'll give you my answer with the caveat that I get excited about a lot of things and not all of them are important.
Right.
But you know, one thing that we're very excited about is essentially reducing the cognitive surface area of using WordPress. So if you imagine what it takes, you're a new user, you're an editor, you want to add some product blocks. Then maybe you have an e-commerce plugin, maybe you don't. Maybe you've got existing products, maybe you don't, et cetera, et cetera. And there's all sorts of context that goes into that, what kind of bank account you have, what country you're in, what language you speak. But you effectively want a system that in one step adds all those things, licenses that plugin, whatever e-commerce plugin it is, and then drops those blocks with generated products into the editor. Because this lowers the barrier to using WordPress quite substantially. We've always had the famous 5-minute install, but we need a version of that for every single feature of the product as well, that essentially reduces the learning curve to 0. And I think the way you get there is starting by indexing all the knowledge we have about WordPress, which is near infinite, thanks to having 20 years of being open source. And then having a way of ranking and prioritizing the most optimal content to answer the user's question or take that action, and then gradually connecting it through to automated actions you can take on their behalf. That's one thing I'm excited about. I want to defer to Anne before I'll have a long rant about the other stuff.
Yeah, I would say, from my perspective, to be clear, work mainly on the core side, but I do look across Automatic to understand the feedback we can pull from the wider company and how to bring it into things we see in the community and kind of connect across all those things. One of the things that makes me excited is around Gutenberg as a framework, which Matt, I think, talked about WordCamp Europe last year. So Tumblr using Gutenberg underneath the layer, and the more things across Automatic using Gutenberg, using the corridor, using blocks, and then add in AI, anywhere we integrate there will then have this huge cascading impact. And that makes me really excited to think about both in terms of within Automatic and our own tools and how we can deliver value to customers sooner. But then also thinking about furthering WordPress and thinking about core. And from my perspective, and part of why it's excited to be on this panel is that I do think we need to have that conversation about how core can help with extensibility in AI. So that's my short answer, is kind of that larger picture.
Can I ask can I ask questions? Am I allowed to do that? Am I off script?
Yeah. If you go out of line, I'll correct you, Shane. Go ahead.
All right. That sounds good. Well, because I look at the core roadmap, and we've all been staring. I live in Europe. I live in a multilingual scenario. we've all been staring at this next huge piece of our core roadmap, which is localization, internationalization, whatever we want to call it, right? And yet, the more I look at AI, the more that seems to be one of the most potent tools in our tool belt to actually make that viable solution. You know, I saw questions in the sideline which were like, well, what besides generative? And my first answer is, well, translation. That's what we've been seeing happening for the last couple of years. And it's moved from awkward to functional, like on a day-to-day basis. Where does that fit in what course planning, if at all? Because I haven't seen much talk about it.
Yeah, so, well, real quick, I just dropped a link on the topic of translation because there is some interesting work being done to integrate ChatGPT and DeepL into translating WordPress. And so that's one of the things I wanted to feature here is I think we can think about AI into WordPress, extending with WordPress. We can also think about AI in terms of helping contributors. So we have like historians in the WordPress community. Why was this decision made? We can ask an AI rather than waiting for someone to come online. It's probably been pinged 100 times in a day. So like we can think about using that kind of knowledge. But in terms of the roadmap, that's part of why I wanted to have that conversation and I shared a post that was like, let's chat about WordPress and AI. And I'll drop a link to that in a second. But I think part of why that conversation is so important to have is to think about, and Jonathan DeRosiers really sums this up well. Let's see if I can link to his comment in particular. I think some of the things is we have to continue, or not have to, but we are continuing with the roadmap. But then also, what can we do that is like, I think he described it as like small paper cut items that can be changed in core, like a new filter or action hook. How are people trying to extend? Where is core getting in the way of extensibility and experimentation and exploring this and bringing WordPress into this? And one of my like secret hopes that I have no idea what will happen with this, but I think getting people who are deep in AI and AI researchers and way outside the WordPress field, how do we invite them in to contribute to WordPress? This is a new contribution pathway, in my opinion. So how are we bringing folks in who can say, how do you want to impact, you know, whatever the number is now, 40+% of the internet? How do we make that compelling? And Dan and I have talked a lot about, this is going to totally go off the rails. And Dan is brilliant with this stuff on a technical level in a way that I am not, but thinking about making WordPress like the chosen thing if AI is going to generate a website. And Dan and I were going back and forth about that. And I think that's like a very interesting, if you think of Gutenberg everywhere, having it as like language of the internet, the blocks protocol kind of style, blocks everywhere. What happens then? And how does WordPress become actually a pathway to participate in this new like economy of information?
So
that's a lot of information.
That's a lot of information. You bring up a few interesting points along with Shane. I do kind of want to build on your answer. I think both you and Dan sort of say we have this wealth of information, but there's not necessarily the best way currently available to make that information available for folks. That sort of says support to me. If I'm thinking support, I'm definitely thinking hosting. And I'm kind of curious what Josh has to say about what his favorite use case, what excites you, and maybe that is something that is related to this or not, or is it you go in an entirely different direction?
So I think I kind of build on what I'm saying around you know, the breadth of WordPress across the web and the potential to you know, I'm excited about all of this, the AI stuff, but I kind of still have one foot firmly in the skeptic box because like we're so clearly in the middle of a hype cycle and there's just like there's a lot of potential, but really finding the actual killer apps often takes a little bit longer than you think. And the potential to find a real practical use for this that can then span that much of the web has the potential to do a lot of good, or it could also do a lot of harm. So we kind of have to be careful about that. And I think for me, where I've seen this I see things starting to take shape, like that idea of, you know, building a conversational interface to creating, to doing complex things in WordPress that can democratize some of the more advanced functionality beyond just simple publishing. That's really powerful. I also think the ability for people who have, you know, like the web is a legacy use case. It's been around for 30 years. There's a lot of it out there. And the ability to have AI do the work to help people structure their data better and then potentially be able to move it around from platform to platform. Like I think there's a world where AI could help get another 20% of the web using WordPress or a WordPress enabled technology, because it will enable us to really, really efficiently migrate our content and our data around in ways that can be labor intensive or technically challenging when you think about all the legacy systems that are out there and trying to figure out how to export data from them and then match it up with some new structure that can then import to WordPress. That's the kind of stuff that the current rising generation of AI is actually very, very good at. If you think of it as like an army of 1,000 interns that can do things for you, right? That I don't know. It's not the like shiniest use case, but it's one where I sense there could be like tremendous practical value.
It is.
But that use case is that use case is huge because look, as our agency side, we do a lot of work with government and universities, accessibility being a very big part of that. Biggest challenge in accessibility is not code, it's the human component. It's just getting people to fill stuff out and do content correctly. And so if you look at if we go back to the whole purpose of democratizing web publishing, of making it easier for people to create valuable content that connects with people in the right way, when I looked at Class of AI and Tenov, I'm not I think what you did is phenomenal. I think it should be in core. I don't see that's my own opinion. Being able to just create content and do it correctly in a simple way, automatically, that the user doesn't need to think about it, that is democratized publishing.
So essentially, that's Shane. You're referring to the demo we saw earlier, as well as I think Joe's demo of what Altus can do. What I kind of hear everybody say, that the more we can take away any of the hurdles in front of us as we're creating a site, because 5 minutes and we have a site, probably even shorter if you do it smartly. But in 5 minutes you have an active site. But then you need to start creating content. Then you need to think about structure. Then you need to build out your pages, and so that's essentially what I'm kind of translating as the consensus of what you are all excited about.
I think
other stuff.
Sure.
What I'm excited about there is dramatically based on timeline, right? So in the short term, I'm excited about alleviating pain points, people having to talk to a human to answer a repetitive question that an AI could answer easily enough. Over the long term, I think whether or not WordPress remains relevant will be determined more by whether an AI would choose WordPress than whether a human would choose WordPress. So what are the qualities of a content management system that an AI would choose to use? It has to be self-describing, it has to be compact, it has to be infinitely extensible, and a few other things. Some of these are properties that WordPress already has, because LLMs have been trained on a long tail of open content that's been accumulated, as I said, over the last 20 years. So there's already an advantage over proprietary systems without so much public content or without a modifiable backend. But over the long term, it's we are going to have agents that represent people interacting with these sites 100 times more than a human does. When I say to an LLM, go accomplish this goal for me, some of those goals will be accomplished in the back end of my website, on the front end of other people's websites, and it will be rare for a human to interact with any of those systems. So those I think are the defining. So those I think are the qualities we need.
Do we have AI currently powerful enough to handle things like this? Or is this more of a future?
It's hard to answer. I mean, yes is the answer to that question, but with 1,000 asterisks, right? So one of the reasons I talk about an LLM being or LLM preferring a CMS that's compact is because we have these limited context windows, at the most sort of 32,000 characters if you're prepared to wait a long time for it to ingest that data and spend a bunch of money. That will change over time, although my assumption is it will always cost more to process more data. So there's an advantage to having a compact API, particularly when you're going to ask the language model to reason over many different tools. You want your tools to be extremely compact and powerful. And also, for example, the ways that we address content. So a WordPress web page can be as long as the field in MySQL, 16 megabytes or 30, some amount, right? But certainly that amount is always going to be larger than a context window. So how do you provide APIs that allow a language model to reason about and modify content in an addressable way within documents, right? So it's not just load this page, it's load this page of this page, this section, this bunch of, are we paginating through blocks, right? Are we recursing through blocks? Those are all things that will be necessary for an LLM to actually be helpful.
You think these, I hear them called agents on a regular basis, but do you, because today we saw demos of the real early days, right? We're just figuring out how to get content into WordPress in a way that's fast and easy. You've got a next generation as these agents become, task oriented. Hey, go in and, could you please go in here, triage all support requests that come in, aggregate them, organize them for me, answer the easy ones. With the hard ones, please get it to the right person. And by the way, go into their website, test it for me real quick, see what's actually going on, and see if I need to do something.
So when you're saying agent, Shane, are we still talking humans, or are we solely discussing this from an AI perspective?
I'm talking about AI. AI agents are agents that have a set of instructions that they run through that can be trained. You could train an AI in theory if it was given access, terrifying, complicated problem we all have to solve, to go in and debug my website.
Well, I don't know if we need to do any training ourselves, like as they get more sophisticated, you'll simply hand them the manual for something, they'll read it and then do the thing, like I don't think we need to go like buying $250 million worth of servers. Like these models are just going to get better and better at using the tools we hand to them. And I think in terms of agents, yes, like every operating system will have an agent within the next release, right? I mean, if you look at like the Microsoft Windows 11 stuff from yesterday, they're basically saying, start this playlist, turn my windows to dark mode, like arrange my windows like this, take my latest keynote slides and summarize them or turn them into an audio file and like post it to my WordPress website. Like you're not even alt tabbing anymore. You're not even opening the apps anymore. You install an app because it's a capability that can be accessed by the language model or by the agent, not because like it has a window so the human can like see what it's doing. But at some point it's simply a capability,
So that sort of brings us to one of my next questions. If AI is doing this, and it sure does look like it's going to, it's going to expand on what's currently doing, what is the impact of this in terms of on the human side of things? Because we can talk a lot about what the AI does and how it can facilitate and help us in our lives, but if we're looking at jobs, if we're looking at skills, if we're looking at even outside of the work realm and just on a personal level, what are the biggest changes we see happening or we are forced to take? And do you have any specific ideas on that?
On the predictions, so my background's in psychology, and so I took a lot of like sociology classes, and one of the things that I read a lot of books about is like with each new wave of technology, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of whatever, but then humans are humans to a certain point. Like we want to be social, we want attention, we want to like connect with people, we want to know what's going on. Like there's a certain amount of like human nature to a lot of this stuff. And like I remember when we could talk about like Gutenberg and the printing press. It was like, oh, this is going to ruin everyone. Everyone will have access to this information while we do. And then like the same thing sort of happened. So I'm curious where we're going to land there. I also, there's a book called Future Shock that talked about, and I was born in the 90s, so I was not around for this, but in like the late 80s, there was this idea of like, oh, we're going to work 3 days a week because technology is going to solve these problems. And like, I think there's a lot of sense of that. It's like, oh, this will automate so much, we'll do less. And instead I worry that this is going to be another acceleration of that because of the current model and the way that like our global systems work. And so I think just that it talks about a lot about like, sorry, say that again?
Do you see this as a risk at the rate that we're advancing?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm not an AI expert, but you saw that open letter by a lot of people signing it saying we need to, move more slowly. And just stuff it talks about this with WordPress. We need to move fast enough to be relevant and slow enough to be ethical. And so I think WordPress is like an interesting way that we need to move in this time. And I am not someone who is like productivity for productivity's sake. I think there are downsides to just like implementing stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I love working WordPress and working on core and working in open source, is because there is a sense of responsibility and commitment to backwards compatibility and kind of bringing things in at the right time rather than just fast. So yeah, I think there's gonna be a huge impact. In my mind, I hope kind of like everyone, that it's like it's augmenting us. Like I have friends, my neighbor right across the way is an English professor, and he's been talking about, you know what, like I need to teach my students how to use this because right now they're writing really terrible papers, and like, but at the same time, I want them to be relevant. I want English to be a relevant degree in the future, and how can I teach them prompts that they can, you know, prompt engineering, and how can we use that within an English degree, for example. So I think there are ways in which there'll be kind of like the same thing I was talking about with contribution pathways. I think there'll be new contribution pathways, but I think we'll see a lot of the same stuff where, kind of like I was saying before, WordPress and maybe using and blogging and sharing information is a way to kind of interact with this new information economy, because the internet has a lot of, the one thing I worry about, or not one thing, but a big thing, is like the diversity of voices on the internet and who has access to the internet and how we can broaden that, because there is a very set perspective. And I've already found personal examples in my own life that AI spits back out something that's not actually representative of a broader narrative. So
I think there's like tremendous risk. Just to go back to the original question, because I think it's a really important one for everybody who's a professional in this space right now. There's, you know, tremendous opportunity and tremendous risk for what this does to the economy and the labor market around technology. And so I think it's really, really critical for, you know, you can see this as a dark future would be one where basically all entry-level jobs are eliminated, and you have like a, you know, sort of a certain professional technical class that uses AI to pull up the ladder behind them and just says, now, you know, nobody else, they can kind of create, you know, an elite bubble, and small number of people at the top of a system profiting immensely from it is a pattern we've seen play out in a lot of places. There's another world where there's another world where AI could actually make it much easier for people to engage with things and get, you know, onboarded into technology and being productive and creative, right? Like it can really help out with, again, with kind of like democratizing things. And I think which way this breaks down, some of it depends on things that are frankly beyond the scope of this panel, that have to do with like how politics works and what amount of collective action we can muster as a species. But some of it is like whether or not this is really truly an open source, there's a real open source core to this technology, which there is today, and that's really important, or not, because if this ends up being very powerful and proprietary, the risks of that like negative future outcome, I think, is greatly increased.
Yeah, that's.
I think.
Yes, Shane, go ahead.
Go ahead, man. All right, I'll be quick. Really simply, there's optimists and pessimists in this debate. And they both have a lot of really good points. I'm in my mid-40s, and throughout my life, we've always been 5 years away from a fundamental catastrophe. Oil's going to run out. Y2K is going to take everything. There's always something, and they're not wrong. It's just throughout my life, I've watched humans manage to, through cooperation, through technological evolution, find solutions. Go to the next one. We also create as many problems as we solve. So I'm not confident that we won't kick ourselves over at some point. But the fact that we're having these conversations and that we're able to work on it slows us down. In my opinion, yes, our industry, web development professionals in the WordPress space is about to be disrupted, in my opinion. Does that mean that we go away? No. I've watched the web development profession. I've been running an agency for over 20 years. About every 5 years, we have to reinvent ourselves to stay relevant to the industry. We have to solve problems in new ways. We have to tackle new industries. We have to find ways to connect with humans in different ways, because at the end of the day, our job is to solve real human problems, not actually build shit. Nobody pays us to build technology at all. They solve us to connect people better, to find ways to elevate the way people work, to do things. And so as long as we continue to find those pathways to add value, AI will be one of the many toolkits, a very powerful toolkit. But yeah, expect your job to change, and expect your kid's job to be even more different, because I like, if I tried to imagine my job today 30 years ago when I was in school, I probably couldn't have done it because it didn't exist.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't anything.
It's
Josh mentioned.
I find it's. Oh, no, it's okay.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I find it useful to think about intellectual labor as a percentage of world labor and a percentage of the world economy. So, like, there are some jobs, like being a lawyer or working on Wall Street, where there's like essentially a rarefied set of knowledge that's held by a small cabal of people and consumes like a disproportionately large percentage of the economy. And when sort of AI and automation first came along, the first people it came for were sort of like low skilled jobs. And so we had this assumption that it's like a bottom up problem, but actually it's more of a top down problem because you can save the most money by eliminating lawyers first. And so, you know, I think that this is a problem for those of us, and I include myself in this, who have sort of effectively monopolized a disproportionately large share of the economy through like relatively scarce but not difficult things. And the other thing I would say is like I'll leave the other part off. I'll leave it there because I don't want to take up too much time. But yes, effectively, I think we should be laddering up, as you say, Shane. There's always going to be more stuff to do, but we shouldn't be getting paid just because of our, like, to Anne's point about sociology, like cultural background and good fortune for having learned these skills in the first place. Like, we should be paid for the actual value we create. And so as the cost of producing all those things drops to zero, like, you know, I think overall the world will benefit. Like, for it to be true that we've all lost our jobs, it also has to be true that the AI is delivering a tremendous amount of value that increases every year.
Yeah. So, sort of following up on that, Josh mentioned something specifically that I'm kind of curious what you think about that, and you kind of touched on this already, Dan. So the skill set needed to understand that not only how to yield AI to whatever it is you want it to do, but to understand what it requires to develop the skill set to use it fully, all the way from developing stuff to actually knowing how to make the AI do what you want it to do. Are we creating a technical sort of upper class of people, not just because they have access and the time to figure this out? Is that a risk we're jumping into?
I don't think.
No.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I just think that these techniques are so simple, a high schooler can learn them in an afternoon. That the power goes to people who have GPUs and networks to run them on.
So,
yeah, I was going to say the same thing. There's an aspect of this that the ability to leverage computing resources is a real barrier to entry, and like if you think about it at a global scale, that is pretty exclusionary. Like, if you want to do it in the cloud, it's expensive. If you want to build a system on your desktop, you're talking about like a lot more than just building a gaming PC, and like that's well out of reach of like 95% of the Earth's population currently. But I also think that's an equation that hopefully will change. So, if we keep this stuff open, it gets slightly more efficient. The cost of computing continues to decline over time, although that's not necessarily keeping up with Moore's law anymore. It's still declining. Like, I think there is a world where you could see truly democratized global access to the technology. I mean, but to be fair, like, there's tons of things today that, require you to have a smartphone, and like that still leaves out, a lot of the people on the planet at the moment. So it just because something's not universally accessible doesn't mean that it's like necessarily elite in a negative way. I think the real risk is that it gets constrained and then entrenched to where access doesn't expand over time.
As long as there's competition, the cost should drop to zero, close to zero, right? Like, the cost of intellectual labor by OpenAI is already some like minuscule fraction of the cost of paying a human to do the same thing, and therefore it is sort of like intrinsically empowering versus having to hire people.
So on the human side of things, learning the skill to how to use the AI, is this something we should start should we incorporate this in education? And if so, to what degree?
So here's the pickle that I have with this conversation. We're in an inflection point where, my opinion, I feel that question is sort of silly because it's going to happen. My OS and my AI will not be terribly different things in a near future. So asking that to me is like saying, well, should I teach my kids to use a computer? And the answer is yeah. But by learning that, they're going to learn whether these are agents or however the AI interacts with the stuff. The idea that everybody has right now, which is I'm going to go to some web browser, ChatGPT, and type in prompts, like that's weird. And that's an intermittent, awkward, it's not even a teenager phase, it's a toddler phase. Where I think as the technology evolves, it'll be far more natural. The answers will get more natural. It'll be part of our, like I've always just wanted to be able to talk to my computer and have an answer back. That would be a much more comfortable way to work with it. And I think we're in reaching range where I may actually get to really experience that in my lifetime.
Yeah. One of the interaction models that I've been exploring at Automatic is because we're in a whole bunch of time zones, right? Sometimes the people you want to ask questions of aren't awake when you're online. And it's kind of funny, but I was thinking back to a system that I tried to do back in 1999 at university. So I'm dating myself a bit here, but and they were just like, that's silly, that's impractical, go away. But it was essentially a system that knew what everybody in the world knew and could ask the right person the right question. So if you had, it was sort of like Google, but made of people, right? Like if you had a question, it would like route the question to the right person. And what we can do with this system is just one extra step, which is to say a large language model is taking questions about stuff and it realizes it has a gap in its knowledge because like the frequency at which it's getting questions in a certain part of the vector space doesn't match the frequency of answers it's finding there, right? So it knows it needs more answers about thing X. And so it goes to, say, an automatician and asks them for that like unit of knowledge, like, oh, like what is the actual list of post types on site foo, right? And it learns from that. And so you can sort of decouple all the questions and answers. So each team and each individual ends up with an agent that other people interact with. And that agent is able to go back to that person when they're available and obtain more of their knowledge so it can better answer those other questions and other, things that are novel go through to the keeper, right? So that's an interesting model that allows organizations to scale without hierarchy. Yeah.
It is. So out of curiosity, who of the panel members have been working with AI before 2023? Shane, a little bit.
Our team started.
I think interacting with it and built into
Correct.
stuff,
Yeah,
but not like seeking it out. Like there are certain tools that I feel like I know that I'm like interacting with an AI, but I'm not necessarily seeking it out now.
Yeah. So in terms of, if we look back in the last 5 months, 6 months of actively using AIs and seeing the exponential growth, does anybody feel comfortable predicting where we'll be in the next 6 months? In any way, shape, or form? Or is this just?
I'll hazard a guess, and I will this is maybe my again, like my 1 foot in the skeptical world or my age showing. I'm going to take the under. I'm going to say in 6 months we'll be right about where we are right now.
Yeah, you mean like the self-driving car I just keep waiting for 16 years?
Yeah, I think that. Well, no. I mean, I don't think it's like. I think the self-driving car is not going to happen until unless we rebuild cities and streets to make it happen, which I don't think would be wise. I mean, well, that's a separate discussion. Self-driving car, really, really hard problem. There is going to be some great stuff that'll come through with AI. I just think it's going to take a little bit longer to bake, to be honest. I think people are like, are like pushing out really cool demos right now, but they're just demos. They're not real products yet, and like real practical applications are going to take time to develop, time to launch, time to figure out what you didn't think of when you developed it. I think the actual, like, that's why hype cycles are risky, because you get super invested in something and expect returns in 6 months, and actually it takes 3 or 4 years to get to real value that can be delivered. So I think we'll probably still be going or at the peak of a hype cycle 6 months from now, and maybe there'll be 1 or 2 things that emerge from that are really real, but they'll take longer.
The question to me is one of regulation. So you look at the draft that Europe just put out a few weeks ago, that it's going to take like a year or two for everyone to figure out how to navigate. And the challenge is when Europe regulates something in one way and the US another and China and everybody, problem is all this technology is global. So trying to solve across all these regulation patterns is a daunting task. And some of the things in there are good, but they are going to slow us down for the people who are interested in complying. There are other people who are uninterested in complying. That's a whole different problem, and that is scary. But for those of us who can work, go ahead, Dan.
And in the meantime, does somebody develop the BitTorrent of AI, where it's impossible to regulate, or the Bitcoin of AI, right?
Yep.
Where it's sort of distributed and maybe not as powerful, but maybe kind of like impossible to regulate.
So, if this is a sort of the common thing we agree on, that it's hard for us to predict it in any way. AI and the future of WordPress, what is the most solid thing that you will see happen in the next 6 months? Is there anything you can say there?
I got a bunch. I on the plugin side, just because I can see within my own organization.
Yeah.
So there are things I can talk about. A number of our plugins, which are large properties. So LearnDash has course creation, quiz creation, stuff that like right now we're betaing. It's going to happen soon. You got Give working on donations. You've got Iconic working on shopping. You have all these different brands who are trying to figure out how to bring the bar, help people not have to invent, like get that first step. So that I think we're going to see that run across the entire industry, like the entire ecosystem, as people figure out how to make content happen faster. At the same time, you've got assisted tools. So all of our tools are about to get AI. You got Copilot, and that's going to start showing up everywhere. And so we'll start figuring out, and I think it's actually going to affect the tools you use. You're going to find tools do this better and do this worse. I'm just waiting with bated breath for BI tools to get good natural language. I don't ever want to write another query in my life. I want to just be like, hey, how many of our sites run WooCommerce and this weird version of Yoast? And like, so I can just know how much do I need to worry about this problem we just found? Oh, there's 3 of them. Don't care. Like what, so, or, oh, wow, this affects tons of our users. Okay, we got to prioritize these kind of things that right now are really hard to get good answers to for the average product owner or the average support leader or people who are in the community trying to make decisions. You're going to see a rapid evolution in support. All the support teams are trying to figure out, and this is all over. This is regarding decision-making, content flow. But I was having a really great conversation with the SiteGround team who said, look, we've had an internal project for a while where we've been just trying to figure out if you have 2 people who are trying to, one giving support and one receiving support, and they're both doing it in English, but neither of them are really English speakers. Let's be fair. And that is like a major use case. That is a huge part of the audience. How do we make it so they can interact in their natural language to each other? Having highly technical conversations, like arguing about WP CLI commands or whatever, and yet have that be better than doing it in English. And we're there. Like that's starting. And so we're going to start seeing things like support in your native language this year, is I hope. We're going to start seeing better routing for support so that if you've got a support agent, if you got all 5 requests that had the same problem, you can solve them all at the same time. Context switching is probably one of the biggest costs to an organization. And so if you could just route work better so there's less content switching, that's happier people, better results.
Yeah.
So,
I do think
those are some great examples. Shane. On the hosting side of things. Now, Josh, I was going to ask, on the hosting side of things, do you have any specific implementations in mind for the?
Yeah, in terms of like being a platform that WordPress runs atop. Going back to one of my earlier answers, like where I'm excited about this potential ability for AI to help people migrate and also optimize the website. I think that's something that is it's a labor intensive process now, and so that's something that we're looking into, which is exciting. I also will say, like, the idea of what you're talking about in the support ticket use case is a very interesting one to me. Like thinking about can AI help us more seamlessly and maybe even invisibly integrate things. So like, to the extent that people have content in like multiple disparate places, organizing that better and helping people not have to worry. Like, there's lots of people who use WordPress directly as their composition tool, but also a lot of people are like copying and pasting from somewhere else. And if we can, again, copying and pasting is a lot like, context switching, solving the same support ticket over and over again. If AI can help us fill in some of those gaps, and it'll just make people's work a lot more fluid, and I think that'll make them more productive and happy. So definitely interested in all those sorts of things for sure.
Yep. Is Automatic planning to release anything super exciting?
I think a lot of the improvements. Oh, am I?
Oh, either.
Unmiked?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think a lot of the improvements are going to start behind the scenes. In many ways, when we have so many smart people working at Automatic, thousands and thousands of smart people, and there is a huge amount of productivity that can be unlocked simply by making the organization run more smoothly using AI and doing some of the decoupling things and stuff that I talked about before, or getting better insights or better translations. And these are not necessarily things, they're not sexy, they're not things users are necessarily seeing, but this, like, the experience just works better and things just move faster. And so, like, and especially with something like AI, where there's so much excitement and so much chaos, having a system that's able to say, hey, this other person's actually decided they want to work on something similar, maybe you should collaborate. And I would love to see some tools like that on WordPress.org, where somebody can come to WordPress.org and type into a chat window, like, how can I help? And then it's like, well, tell me a bit more about you. Do you know more than one language? Are you a designer? Are you a user? This and that. And then you sort of interact with it. And it's like, here's these 3 tickets that need a review, or here's this like post about a thing you're interested in, or here's this stuff that needs to be translated. And like taking that sort of like infinite canvas of all the things you can do to help with WordPress and condensing it down to a way that an individual person can meaningfully contribute and connect to other humans who want to do the same thing. Like, that seems like a really big opportunity as well. And I think within 6 months, we're probably going to see sort of like 2nd generation AI products come out, which essentially is anyone who properly measured what they were actually doing, such that they could graduate from like a raw LLM integration to something more sophisticated, where maybe they're properly classifying the question the person is asking and shortcutting it in certain ways. Like, there are certain support questions where we know that it should go straight to support. And like, there are other ones where we know that we should go to docs. Like, and little tiny things like that, thousands of them, add up to a much better business. So like for a company like Automatic, I think that's a lot of it. And then other like public facing product integrations, there's a lot of small things. I mean, Jetpack has an amazing, WordPress.com has an amazing AI block. And that's free for everyone to use, and it's generative AI and all that kind of stuff. But like, the next generation is going to look quite different from that.
Cool.
I think, Daniel, like when you're talking about that internal facing, look, one of my simple dreams is to just have a chatbot in Slack where I can ask HR questions like, hey, I broke my leg in February. Trying to figure out how to navigate that required me talking to 3 people. Silly use of my organization. I should have been able to go, I broke my leg, I'm in the hospital, what do I do? Oh, you do this, here's a link to that. Let me actually, forget it. You don't even worry about it. Thanks for telling me, Shane. I'll go file this with HR. I'll go do this for you. Like, the challenge that we ran into as an org. So I went to DocSpot and said, hey, can I feed it a bunch of private HR stuff? And what do you think my organization said? Hold on, what does that mean? What happens to that data? Is that okay? And we realized we didn't have a policy yet. We didn't even have the knowledge to know what was safe or dangerous as an organization to figure out whether or not we can feed it our handbook. And so
and it changes all the time. This is partly why we're deploying a lot of private infrastructure. So for the data that you don't want to send to the public cloud, we have the ability to process it. Maybe not with the same context lengths, but close enough. And maybe we can start to train some models that we can open source. I mean, it'd be cool to have some models that understand Gutenberg really well, like understand themes really well, can reason about the relationship between like markup and what the user sees on different devices. These are all small models that really need to be trained by someone with the incentive to actually map Gutenberg to the visual relationship.
Yeah.
you all have
thank you for your answers. I have a few questions from the chat. I'd love to, because my chat didn't work. Now it finally works again. There's a few questions that have been asked. When one of in particular has the most amount of votes. So Ant Miller asks, a great interface is a great interface, whether it's AI behind it or not. Do we need to make it clear to users when we've used AI tools? Are there exceptions?
100% of the time, it should be clear that AI has been responsible for part or all of the response.
Agreed.
Is
Yeah,
that because of copyright, or is that because, I mean, to me, like, all code should have somewhere where you can see who's accountable for the code that produced. But if you use Copilot, are you saying now I need to write this code was supported by Copilot, and here's a list of all the APIs that were involved in generating it?
To some degree, yes, it's an ethical choice because I think we're entering a regime where human-like outputs become more and more common. It's one thing to have a system produce an automated output. It's another thing to produce a human-like output. And across the breadth of all the information we consume, not specific to WordPress, human beings need to be aware of what's come from an AI. And I believe government will eventually pass laws mandating that.
I like the idea of having authorship be transparent in general, but I want that in generally. Like, we're struggling with that problem without AI right now in terms of content confidence.
That's a big reason why Google took so long to release Bard. They didn't want to destroy the web flywheel by like consuming knowledge and no longer linking back to it as a reference. And so, like, you know, yeah, that would destroy the ad model, right?
Yeah, well, it would also create a situation where, like, you've eaten all your seed corn, and you're no longer producing the web because nobody's indexing it and visiting it, and so your ability to accrue new knowledge into the models declines to zero.
Yeah.
So you have to figure out a way to balance those.
Like, we need individual organizational accountability in terms of trust indexing, and right now, that's the thing that feels like it's missing. And as we accelerate, it gets harder and harder to know who created this content, why, what's the angle, what's driving it, and how do I know what to do with it? Are we at time, Tom?
I think so.
I'm sneaking into stage left because we've hit our time marker, and I thought that was a nice place to draw us to a close. Remkes, I don't know whether you had anything that you particularly wanted to do to draw us to a close. If you do,
No. I had a few more questions I was finally going to answer, but ask and then hope get an answer. But
I see you raising your hand. Perhaps you're just eager to get in with something.
Yeah, could I just say one final thing, just from the core side? I just want folks to be involved in shaping it, and that includes core contributors needing to experiment with this stuff, and it also is you all, the WordPress community, and folks outside the WordPress community. This could be a really cool new contribution pathway, and we need people who are using it and giving feedback. And I feel like I'm repeating myself because this is what happened with site editing when I was running the outreach program, but it's the same holds true. And I think we can use the same approach that we've used with phase 2 and site editing and all the phases of WordPress and Gutenberg to do the same with AI. And I think it's something we need to keep an eye on, and folks are listening, Core wants to know. And I just really encourage you all to share. So I just wanted to end on that.
I agree. That's a great opportunity.
Okay, wow, thank you so much, illustrious panelists, and Remkes for hosting too. I think that was a very well enjoyed session, if I from the chat that I was following. I think all that leaves me to do is to kick you all off stage so that I can wrap up this event. So away from chat and away from you all, thank you again for taking the time today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for organizing.
Yeah, thanks for
organizing.
Good plan.
Okay, I'm going to start clicking to send people off. I have to do it one at a time, and don't read anything into the order.
I think Shane did.
Okay, so I'm going to start muting people. I think you all just stay in the green room until you happen to leave as I dive into some closing remarks. We're reaching the end of today's event. Now that I'm sitting here, I'm feeling pretty pleased with how it's gone. As we've said a few times, we pulled this together very quickly. And so one never quite knows how such things are going to go. I think we owe a lot of that to our gracious speakers and presenters who've delivered some really slick and interesting sessions. I hope that you, everyone watching, have enjoyed this as much as we've enjoyed putting it on. Whilst I am wrapping up, actually, we would love to capture just some of the sentiment from the room. And so I think we've got some polls that should be showing up on the right there. Perhaps if you click on that little polls icon, those should pop up. It would be really valuable to us if you just take a few seconds to go in and answer those polls. That'll be useful information for us as we take this event forward and decide what to do next. So I'll leave you doing that while I carry on talking. It's definitely been very satisfying to see the chat be so vibrant and active. So kudos to all you chatters for getting involved. I think a couple of clear things that have jumped out to me as we think about doing this perhaps again. I think definitely the way questions work on Crowdcast has felt like it could be better. It felt like we've kind of left questions behind with sessions rather than bringing them along with us. And so that's something we'll definitely look at. It's also definitely struck me just how valuable it is hearing from people outside of the WordPress community as we're like all wrestling with this and trying to figure out where the opportunities and the risks are and what we should do about them. And I guess also as a new technology, AI brings a lot of quite large ethical questions, that are much broader than like WordPress and our products. Things around labor and copyright and capitalism and the future of humanity. And today we've kept it pretty focused on WordPress and its features and capabilities and perhaps the kind of nearer term future that things like ChatGPT might bring to WordPress. But I do think as a community, we're a pretty amazing, diverse, global group. And I think we've probably got quite a lot to offer to contribute to these like larger ethical discussions about the future of technology and humanity. And so I think that's something that we can all lean into as a community. This is the first time we've done this. And so I'd really value any feedback you've got. Feel free to just like share that in chat now or send us a message through one of our various channels. Tell us what's been great, tell us what could be better, and tell us what you'd love to see next time as we consider whether to do something like this again. I do want to just thank the team at Human Made who put this together behind the scenes. I think it's gone very, very smoothly, which is a credit to them and the effort that they've put in. And again, to thank all our speakers. It's been a really wonderful example of the openness and collaboration I think our community is known for, that we can all come together, some of us competitors, and like collaborate and share our knowledge and our learnings as we all work to make WordPress better. That's just been really awesome to see in action. This feels like a really exciting time for WordPress and for open source more broadly. I think we're already seeing like open source communities thriving around a lot of these new AI technologies. And that's really exciting. Like it seems like as this platform shift gets underway, that it's perhaps going to be dominated or captured by open source, like even more quickly than some of the previous shifts that we've been through. So that's pretty exciting. I think that there's actually this is a great moment for open source more broadly. This is something we're going to continue investing in and exploring at Human Made, and we plan to continue sharing what we're building and learning as we work on this stuff. And as we're working with our clients to build things, and I think continuing to bring together kind of conversations and discussions and space of sharing like this. And we'd love to keep this conversation going with you and to hear from you if you're interested in anything that you've seen discussed today. I think I'll leave you with a request. This technology is developing fast, but it's also relatively easy to use, which I think is particularly useful and interesting. And so I think as we consider these larger questions, both near-term opportunities and perhaps those longer-term risks, I think that we can, as I said, bring a lot of value as a community, as an ecosystem, if we lean in and get involved as much as possible. And so a lot of the folks that you have spoken today have got things that you can already go and try and use and experiment with. ChatGPT itself, as well as things like Bard from Google or Bing search, are readily available and are relatively easy to use. And everything we're doing, we're shipping in our Altus Accelerate plugin, so definitely do check that out. And I think there's no better way really to get a feel for this technology and for what is likely or feels likely to evolve over the coming weeks and months than just using it. So I would just encourage everyone to give it a go. All right, I want to thank you all for spending time with us today. Follow Human Made on Twitter. We're at Human Made LTD. If you want to keep up with everything we're doing, we'll also be sharing all the recordings from today's sessions as soon as we're able. And with that, I'm gonna take this offline. I think you should be able to carry on chatting, if not in the chat with this session, at least in the lobby if you go back there. So I hope that works. I don't actually know. We've not done this before, but we'll see. Okay, well, that's it. Thank you very much. That's it from me, and we'll see you next time.